Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Tech Tuesday. My name is Dr. Haifa Maamar. I am the Education Director of Emerging Technologies here at Full Sail University. Today we're streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Today's episode is about the future of the Metaverse, Web 3.0, AI, and extended reality. And with my guest, we're going to discuss how to approach and innovate in the future through emerging technologies. So talking about my guest today is the founder and CEO of EndeavorXR, which is a leading global XR consulting firm working with Fortune 500 companies on XR, Metaverse, Web 3.0 strategy and deployment. She is one of the world's leading experts on the Metaverse and Web 3 and speaks globally on these topics. And actually, she was recently named one of the top 50 most powerful women in tech for 2023 and top 100 women of the future. I have with me today the amazing Amy Peck. Hello.
Hi, Haifa. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Great. I'm very happy to be here with you today.
I'm happy to have you here with me today. I'm happy you are here in Orlando. Welcome to Florida.
Thank you.
And we're so happy to have you. I mean, I'm impressed looking at I didn't want to read everything about her journey and her background because I want her to introduce herself and talk about everything that she's been doing and her achievements. But seriously, respect, as we say.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so impressed. So, Amy, today we'll be talking about the future of the Metaverse, Web 3, XR, AI, all these different acronyms and technologies that we hear on a daily basis and we use on a daily basis, especially us, the tech professionals. But before we go into that, let's first start with, if you can introduce yourself to our audience and talk a bit about your background, and then maybe in the same as you're talking about your background, you can tell us about how you started the AR, VR experience, and then what inspired you to found your own company?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I founded my company back in 2014. Mm-hmm. We were called EndeavorXR then because it was really our focus. And we recently changed, during the last 3 or 4 years, changed our name to EndeavorXR. But I was working for a company called Leap Motion, which was this little tiny...
I remember Leap Motion.
Do you remember?
Well.
It was
yes.
great. And it's actually great technology even still, but it was low latency.
Like for hand tracking.
Yeah, hand tracking. And I used to sit right in the middle of all the developers, and they got a hold of the first Oculus DK1, and they duct taped a Leap Motion to the front of this DK1, and I got a hold of it, and I could see my hands in this virtual space, and wow. I just thought, okay, this is the game changer. We always joke that people always remember their first time in VR. Well, that was mine.
Yes, that's amazing. So then how did you, then that kind of was like the aha moment for you to go into the XR field, I guess?
Absolutely.
And to help companies. Tell us more about what you do with your company. Like, what is it exactly that the strategy behind?
Yeah, so we do a lot of front end kind of pure play strategy. So we look at companies come to us and they have an idea of how they might want to use the technology, but what we want to do is look at all of their business units and really what are multiple opportunities so that we can kind of increase the ROI and sort of leverage that investment so that it's not just in one particular area, but that investment is valuable across all of their business units. And then we also have build capabilities through a series, a network of really powerful partners. But what has been really great about the industry since I started is when I first started, our clients had to almost always build their software from the ground up.
Okay.
And we did a lot of training, and so we had custom developers who would build those for us. The notable difference is that today, it's much easier for companies to get started because there's a lot of software out there already. And so that's really the fundamental difference. So we look at the landscape of technology, help them discover, do you even need a headset for this? Is XR even correct? And if it is, what is the right hardware software combination? And then where do you start? And more importantly, how do you scale?
I love that how you're approaching technology. Sometimes with technology, everyone wants to be in technology and to use technology, but and we'll talk about this. Sometimes people don't take the time to think about what is technology adding to your business? How is it helping your business? Does it even make sense to use that? So let's start first with explaining all these different acronyms that we'll be using today for our audience. So I want, and all the realities. I mean, there are so many different realities that we'll be talking about today. So I want, if you can just explain for our audience the differences between augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, extended reality, and then later on we'll talk about Web 3.0.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I do think we have a slide on really what we call the spectrum of reality, right?
Yeah.
So on the one hand, you have augmented reality, and then on the other hand, you have virtual reality, where you're in a headset, you're fully occluded from the world,
Yeah,
and
you're
it's
completely immersed.
Exactly, and it's a computer, fully controlled, computer-generated environment. Then in the center is where I think it gets particularly interesting. Microsoft coined the term mixed reality. The fundamental difference really between augmented and mixed reality is that augmented reality is just a heads-up display. So if you've driven like a BMW or a luxury vehicle that has a display on the windshield, or if you played Pokemon Go in the early days,
Of course.
it didn't really have any context. There were just these characters.
It was like they were not only
Yes.
like in front of you in your physical world.
Yeah, and I didn't, I actually turned off the AR because I found it kind of annoying because it didn't really interact with the real world. Mixed reality is really where that digital overlay has context to the real world.
Love
It
it.
has location awareness. It also has context to whatever object you're looking at or building you happen to be looking at. And that's really where this is all going, but the headsets aren't quite there yet.
Perfect. So let's talk about the evolution of the web.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So
and
Web 1, Web 2, and
Web-
we're on the eve of Web 3.
3.
So Web 1 was actually a decentralized construct. We talk about decentralization like it was just invented, and that was actually the original Web 1 was a server-to-server construct, driven largely by websites and chat rooms. It was static displays. Then we moved to Web 2, which was centralized, but allowed us to read and write, right? So it was a two-way
So same
street.
way we see it on the screen now.
Yeah,
with,
exactly. And that was driven largely by social media, and e-commerce. Now that we're moving to Web 3, the semantic web, where AI really helps us not only with search but kind of gather information that we're looking for, and be much more predictive. It's this Web 3 will go back to being decentralized in a perfect world, and will be driven largely by the creator economy, identity, games, and entertainment. But identity, very importantly, we have to take back our data, and this is an important piece of the decentralized realm, is being able to manage our own data, monetize. Yes, I mean I think selling data is, we can do that, right? And it should be our choice to do that. But I think, how do we leverage data for better experiences, for more transparency, and to really think of maybe what a different economic construct might look like?
I love it. So can you give me some use cases of where this technology can be used? We're talking about the extended reality in general, some applications or use cases just for, or some of the use cases of companies you worked with Endeavor. Yeah.
Well, we look at, when we work with companies, like I said, they usually come to us with an idea, and it's often around training, or they're solving a particular.
Yeah, training is like
and there's
kind of a regular.
reams of data about how efficient it is, and better retention, and the ROI is huge. But I really, we look at sort of more of a horizontal, because this technology is going to touch every single business. So it's not really vertical specific.
Yes.
Right? So we look at, training, collaboration, design, and visualization as kind of the horizontal use cases. And then within that, you have very business and vertical specific ways to approach each. But every company can use at least one, if not all, of those use cases. What we need to do is help them define where they're going to get the earliest return on investment, because sometimes it's counterintuitive. They think they're going to solve a problem, which, yes, the technology will solve, but that's not necessarily where they should start, because they won't see the most obvious ROI with that. And in order to get continued investment, within, you have to kick all of this upstream to get budget. We want to help focus on where they're going to get the biggest return on investment. And again, scalability is always the key.
So what are some of the tangible, I mean, you talked about scalability and so on, but some of the tangible benefits here that you see by using this technology, like whether it's Web3, whether it's XR, for a business, for example, like what are some of the benefits?
Some of the benefits. Well, I think we talked about training. That's one of the core elements. And then within training, what we're seeing now, especially with the advent of Web3, and let's be honest, most companies aren't going to leapfrog from Web 2 to Web 3.
No.
It's really, we're going to sort of live in Web 2.5 for
Yes.
a while. And there are going to be reasons to have a centralized database and a centralized construct, and then there are going to be reasons to have a decentralized construct. And so what companies need to do is have sort of this parallel paths, optimizing their systems today. And that's really where immersive technology can shine in combination with AI and blockchain. And it's looking at their kind of suite of challenges that they have as a business, training being one, design, like car manufacturers used to actually build physical bucks and ship them, to their design teams around the world, which is just, we think about it today and it's absurd, right? So to be able to actually have people collaborate in these virtual environments. It helps with ESG measurements. We're working on a project now to use a digital twin to be able to start and sensors in physical space to measure where the baseline ESG is today. And you have companies that have multiple physical spaces, whether it's warehouses or retail environments around the world. The second piece of that is then aligning it to regulatory, which is going to be different in each region. And so, and they're going to have to be able to transparently do reporting on where they are relative to the regulatory. And then the third, and what is probably the most challenging for most companies is, we've put out all these lofty goals for 2030, 2040 and beyond, and how are they going to meet those goals?
How are they going to
and
assess
so
and make sure that they're there?
we take that baseline measurement, we look at how we can optimize and accelerate where they are today to where they want to be in 2030 and 2040.
I love it. So you mentioned AI. And
Yes.
I told you that we're going to be talking about AI as well. So with the evolution of AI, and especially this, the widespread use of ChatGPT, like now everything is ChatGPT. I'm curious on your thoughts, hearing your thoughts on how AI can be used as a partner to encourage creativity and augment our life in a positive way. And then on the other side, I also want to hear your thoughts on privacy and sharing data, because I mean, you mentioned sharing data earlier of like we want to protect our own data and so on. So, with AI, it's both ways. But let's talk about the positive side of it.
Yes, I think.
And ChatGPT specifically.
Well, yeah, and ChatGPT is a fantastic tool. The genie's out of the bottle. Right, people are talking about, oh my God, this is so scary, and we've got unconscious bias built in. Every technology, when it gets kind of released from the labs and into the hands of the users, it's the scariest part, but it's actually the most exhilarating piece of it, because we haven't, to this day, and it's the same in virtual environments, we haven't had a huge swath of end users actually pushing the tech. Right, and so there are some dangers to generative AI in general, especially relative to unconscious and even conscious bias, but those are being quickly uncovered by the fact that you have such a huge population now using ChatGPT. It's almost unseated. The Metaverse and XR, like no one even remembers what the Metaverse is. It was all anyone could talk about just 3 short months ago.
Yes, I agree. It's like now everyone is just like ChatGPT and everything that they can do with ChatGPT. And I mean, I understand from in some fields, in some sectors, how important ChatGPT can be and how it makes their life easier, but also it can how it can be sometimes, and AI in general, I'm not specifically talking about ChatGPT, but AI in general, how it can be sometimes, I wouldn't say dangerous, but like we need to take it really with a caution, caution,
Yeah, and you talked about privacy. I think that's one of the critical elements, and it's interesting because I think the average person wants the government to step in and regulate and kind of protect us from all of this technology. On the other hand, there's a mistrust of the government. There are concerns on whether or not the government can keep up. I mean, it's hard enough for us in the industry being able to keep up on all of the advancements with the technology. And so I really do think that this is a moment for us to, there's the term self-sovereign identity, right? And it's a way for us to take back our data. But the self in self-sovereign identity is the most important component, that we as consumers have to demand that we get control of our data, that we're then able to manage, and again, whether it's monetize or have some kind of transparent exchange of value for data. I think it's actually our responsibility as consumers. Like GDPR didn't really come about just because of regulators. It was because people were finally recognizing that how their data was being harvested by large companies.
Okay, so let's move to the metaverse right now. And we have several definitions of the metaverse, and I feel that the words metaverse, Web 3.0 are becoming overused terms. And people who use these words, they don't necessarily understand the meaning behind the words or the benefit of this technology sometimes, So before we talk about how companies are using the metaverse, what they're doing exactly in the metaverse, I would like to have your definition of what the metaverse is, specifically that you are an expert in the field. So from your perspective, what is it? How do you define the metaverse?
Yeah, and again, I think you're spot on that everyone has kind of a slightly different definition. I think the way I think about it is moving all matter of data and digital experience from 2D screens into the real world, right? So that it becomes in context, whether it's location aware, and just being able to call up data at the right time in the right place for the right person. And metaverse to me is a term that has lost its meaning a little bit because of the overuse. And I think the crux of it is that we have actually trained ourselves to interact with data and entertainment on 2D screens, and yet we live in a 3D world, and yet we don't really know how to interact with 3D data in a 3D world. And so it's going to be this kind of learning curve, much as we had to train ourselves, like how to open apps and swiping. None of that existed right before the smartphone. And it just became, it was baked into the SDKs. It became part of the, the user experience and the UI. And we just learned it, right? And so we again, when I talked about, we don't have a large swath of users, that is the key to pushing the technology forward and kind of understanding what those interactions will look like in the future. So it's just data will live all around us. And so instead of having to look down at my phone, I joke that in the future my kids can ignore me by looking right at me because the latest episode of Black Mirror will just be floating over my head.
Well, I haven't watched that one. So there is a hype nowadays around the metaverse, blockchain, Web 3.0, and companies are embarking on the metaverse without necessarily having a strategy, or understand what they need to do in the metaverse. I feel that sometimes they just want a presence in the metaverse because everyone else is doing it. So it's kind of that. Yes, well, because this company or this company is doing it, then for some reason it's like that peer pressure. Everyone is doing it, but we're not really having a strategy behind it on how to engage with your consumers or how to engage with your users. So this is just one concern that I see with the metaverse. I wanted to hear your thoughts on what are some of the mistakes that companies are doing nowadays, to try to be in the metaverse, and what they should do, to avoid these mistakes.
Yeah, I think the challenge has been much to your point that it's like, oh my God, what do we have to do now? And you'll hear someone in the C-suite will start saying, well, what are we going to do about this metaverse thing, right? And it's much sexier to say we're in the metaverse than it is to say, oh, we're building our strategy. But that slide that this is a journey and not a destination is actually really valid because you have to really start thinking about, there's two kind of parallel paths. So that first is, all right, how do we use the technology for what it's good at today, right?
Yes.
And that's improving processes, better training, better visualization, much better collaboration,
Yes.
and bringing your diverse workforce into these collaborative environments. The second path, which is critical, is to really develop what are the products and services of the future. We talk about reinvention and how we look at where we are today and where we're going. We actually have the ability to shape what that looks like, and this technology.
Yes.
And again, we're in the epicenter of simulation, right? So we can simulate all of these outcomes. We can simulate how to improve everything, like we're doing with operations and with ESG goals, for example. But I think we have this opportunity to kind of look at these constructs, a different economic construct, the self-sovereign identity, and then what that means for companies servicing a consumer with a transparent relationship. Companies moving to a transparent relationship with their consumers is terrifying for most companies because we just haven't been built that way, right? There's IP and there's trade secrets. And so, how do we leverage, AI and blockchain and self-sovereign identity to change the way we think about the economy? We've built an economy of scarcity, right? And that is what determines value in many cases. What if there's an economy of abundance? What does that look like? And how will companies then service the consumer of the future?
I love it. So let's talk about the metaverse from a consumer perspective and a business perspective. If you can explain that. And then I wanted to well, let's start with that.
Let's start with the consumer.
Let's start with the consumer and the business perspective, and then I will ask the next question.
We should have a slide on consumers. One of the things that we look at, and again, we've been focused until about 3 years ago primarily on operations, right? And we do have retailers and brands as clients, but we've really been focused on how do we make your business better. In the last 3 years, we've started to look at how they might engage the consumer, and one of the most compelling components of that is how games, entertainment, social media, and fashion are all colliding, right? And this image in particular is of Travis Scott doing his concert in Fortnite, and they've done several of these. There were 27 million concurrent viewers, right? And so, we've heard all of the, projections on this is $1 trillion, this is a $30 trillion opportunity. It doesn't matter. We're focused on the economics in the existing construct, and we're not really focused, again, on really, what do the consumers want from this?
I agree.
And they want something that is more real. They want things that are truthful. They want transparency. Social media is going to really change. Social media will live all around us. We might, we were at dinner last night. We might record a piece of that experience and give some advice on what you might eat or what wine you might try.
That's true.
And then we could just anchor that little 3D experience there, and then anyone who knows us, who's in our circle, if they break the geofence, then it'll pop up and say, "Hey, Amy and Haifa, we're here. Do you want to see their experience?" So imagine that whole construct is kind of changing, where all of this information, all of this data is going to live all around us. That's really where it starts to me to become more of a utility for consumers, because right now it is largely kind of games and entertainment. We're seeing some fashion, digital fashion, which is really exciting. But until we get that day-to-day utility, I don't really see the adoption being as ubiquitous as we need it to be.
How about AI and ChatGPT? How would that help with this, of like creating that utility?
Well, I think it's for example, when you're standing on, in fact, this is an example that I use all the time because I am now out of RAM. I have to lose a piece of information to take in a new piece of information.
Okay.
And that is often when I meet someone at an event, I can never remember their name. And so would it be great if I just had my, my AR glasses on and it just like popped up their LinkedIn profile, and then AI would then, go into my little database, because that's, how I'm going to interface with all of my data, and it would pull up a little snippet of the conversation that we had, so I remember what we talked about. That would be, I would pay very good money for that. So anyone out there who wants to make it.
Students, Full Sail students, if you heard this idea, please start implementing?
I will write you a check tomorrow. I will be your first investor.
You have this on your portfolio if you implement this, and Amy Peck is going to pay you. I am also very interested in this.
Yes.
Because I agree with you. We meet so many people that at some point you don't remember, like, who is that person or what is it exactly that we talked about?
And it's terrible.
I feel bad every
Yeah,
time.
you
I'm like,
do.
oh my gosh, like, okay, like I'm trying to talk and just trying to get information so just it can trigger something in my head. But I agree with you. This is a great use of technology there, and how AI can just find that experience, get you the information, and then you're not awkward. Speaking with that person.
And even as it sort of moves all around us, imagine being on a street. You can kind of hold up your phone. You can see every restaurant that's within 3 blocks and see what the reviews are. That's a very simple use case. But what if you could also, you're a tourist somewhere, or you're in New York City, and you want to see what it looked like in 1920. Or 1850. And, with your glasses, or even now, you could hold up your phone and it would just peel back and it would show you what life was like then. And so, again, it's I
think there is an application already about that.
There's so many of these. And again, we have this technology. What we haven't done a good job of is showing consumers that it is beyond just gaming and entertainment, and that there are some really great ways that it can make your life better on a day-to-day basis.
So that's an amazing way to go to my next question, which is, here in Orlando, we do use the Metaverse. We are the Meta Center, and we have all the different companies within the ecosystem. Well, we have amazing talent. Universities are creating talent on a regular basis. We have companies like military, tech, simulation. We are actually the simulation hub, the epicenter of simulation. The National Center for Simulation is here in Orlando, but also we have Unity and in our backyard, and with the digital twin now, which is a big thing right now, the Orlando Economic Partnership is using the digital twin to attract investors, just for them, not instead of like driving all around Orlando. So now it's a presentation where you have a digital twin of Orlando, and then they can view different data about a certain location. But also, the digital twin is used by so many different companies to for decision making, like look at the data, run a simulation, see if something is, how a certain change in a floor or a building or something, how is it going to affect the business, and so on. So I know you're not with Unity, but I also know you are a big
very
fan.
Close, yes.
You're a big fan
I'm very close with them.
Of digital twin.
Yes.
So I want you to talk more and elaborate more on how important this is, like the digital twin or a digital identity, I would say, from a business perspective, like on a city level, state level, and so on.
Yeah, and I would even go as far as to say that digital twin is the metaverse for business, right? And so, if you look at, we have a slide up on the screen on the left, digital twin is exactly what it sounds like. It's a digital twin of a physical object. And so it can be, an aircraft is in that image, or, a manufacturing line, which you can use for training, or even on the job training or assistance. But then on the right, you have the other end of the spectrum, which is where we want to get to. It's the AR cloud. There's many different terms for it, but effectively, it's a digital twin of the entire planet. So I don't think I can even stress the importance of digital twin. I think it's going to be everything. It's going to be the backbone for how we engage with the digital landscape, especially kind of in concert with the physical landscape.
I love it. I know that we have another slide after that.
We do. That's more specific to the AR cloud. And so I loved how you mentioned, the Meta Center. And I've actually been at Orlando Economic Partnership, and I've seen the digital twin and how they're able to kind of click through and show
everything.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing.
You have all the data there. They collected. I mean, they do a great job of showing it.
It's fantastic. And so, I have an image here that shows actually multiple layers of digital twin. And really the point of this is that that digital twin that they're using has a very specific purpose, right? So it is built specifically to be able to showcase the city, demographic information, parking information, anything that a company moving here would need to know. But then other layers of that digital twin would actually start to feed into as we move forward into smart cities, which I want to segue into. But before we get there, think about the different types of layers. I already mentioned the ESG, so using sensors to kind of measure. That would be one layer. Another would be kind of maybe an ergonomics, so a human impact digital twin. So you would be able to monitor using the digital twin how people move through the space, and then simulate different ways to lay out the space for optimal efficiency. You could do that with manufacturing lines, for example, because you have people of all sizes working on a manufacturing line. You have to make sure they have enough room, that someone with bigger hands can actually fit and work with a piece of equipment. So it's a build it once and then deploy multiple times scenario, which
depending on the scenario.
Yeah. And it parallels Unity in a way, because Unity, the way Unity was kind of born and not only through kind of the indie game developer, but they also had a build it once and deploy across multiple platforms model, and that was why they were so successful. It's like you could build a game and then you could easily optimize it for mobile or for web or whatever it happened to be. It's no surprise that they've gone all in on digital twin, because it's the same thing, right? Once you build a digital twin, you keep improving the digital twin, you add the different functional layers of that digital twin so that ultimately it feeds into what will be a smart city.
So talking about smart cities.
Funny you should mention that.
So I know you've been interested in smart cities, working a lot in, given talks about smart cities and sustainable development, and starting to move your business towards smart cities as well. So before we talk about all that, let's first define what a smart city is and what factors and characteristics are used to determine the smartness of a city. There are I think, if I'm not mistaken, Orlando is considered a smart city at this point. Yeah.
Yes. Orlando is a designated smart city, which is why you guys are having a hard time getting rid of me.
Well, we want you to stay.
I've been here 3 times already this year.
We want you to stay.
Yeah, and so we have a slide up, and everyone's seen these slides of like the smart cities and the little bubbles everywhere. But really, what it is it's about the exchange of data. And the exchange, most importantly, of dynamic data. And so it starts with smart buildings.
Yes.
Right. So until we don't get to smart cities, and we don't get to the AR cloud without smart cities, and then we don't get to smart cities without smart buildings. And so it's optimizing that data so it can be leveraged at the city level, and that has to be dynamic data. And so if we can go to the next slide, there we talk about the infrastructure that is required for cities to really become smart cities. And so the sensor data is one component of it, but then it's 5G, edge compute, and cloud combined with AI, because we always think of data as either consuming data or storing data. This is really a two-way pipe, and it's why 5G, people say, why do we need so much power? Well, it's because this is dynamic data. So we're constantly streaming up to the cloud, and then we're using AI to parse that data and kind of deposit it where it's most relevant. There's an image on the right there of autonomous vehicles.
The autonomous vehicle,
right? And they had their 15 minutes of fame, a few years ago, and now those have gone quiet, and they're sitting in a pile next to Metaverse now, while generative AI takes the main stage. But if we look at the importance of data, it's not only valuable in aggregate, but it's valuable even if the initial utility isn't. And the example I give is using LiDAR for an autonomous vehicle. The whole purpose of that LiDAR data is to seek anomalies, so in order to keep the passenger safe. So a ball or a child running into the street, something that is unexpected, so the car has time to react. So it is dynamically parsing all of that data. It's throwing away data that it already knows, right? That's buildings, it might be a tree or a stop sign. But trees change, stop signs change, buildings don't really change, but there is a component that will change in the real world. And so all of that data they're throwing away can actually be used to true up dynamically the AR cloud so that we always have an accurate representation of what a city looks like. And then it's just modeling, using AI to help model out, traffic patterns, pedestrian weather patterns, and how that impacts the usability. And you mentioned the not only the sustainable impact, but the livability and the inclusivity. That is a critical component, because if we don't understand how all manner of people with varying abilities can interact with the data, we need to be able to make it accessible to everyone. And using this sensor data and constantly applying simulations to it will help us make sure that these smart cities are truly inclusive.
I love it. I'm not even going to ask how beneficial or important, because it is very critical to have, to be in a smart city, to know that a city is smart and you have all the technology, the Internet of Things around you that is helping give you a better life and make your life easier. One question here I want to ask is that, always we are at a university, and for me, I'm always thinking about our students. What kind of some of the fields that the students can focus on if they want to work on projects related to smart cities? If you can give an example.
There are so many opportunities. I hope it's okay to bring up a conversation we had last night, which I really enjoyed, which was around education. And it's I was talking about Full Sail today, and you kept telling me new things about Full Sail. I was like, it's like peeling the onion, like all of the great things you're doing here.
Yes, thank you.
But K through 12 education hasn't really evolved. Right.
I agree with you.
There have been, Montessori. There have been some advancements.
Well, I would say that there isn't enough use of technology in it.
Yes. But where it starts to make sense, and this is relevant to the question. But I think that universities have an opportunity to start to help K through 12 institutions really bring that technology in and start to build this kind of ecosystem, and not think of education as elementary, middle, high school, then college, university, and then maybe grad school. Like it's a lifelong learning endeavor. So if I were a student today, I would be looking at how can we educate the next generation of students to be prepared for the types of challenges that we're faced. This isn't the industrial age anymore. This is the age of technology and the age of AI. So things that are, humanity driven, so, empathy, critical thinking skills, those are not taught in school, right? We're still stuck on the reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? So I think that's one opportunity. I think for, relative to smart cities, I think that anyone who wants to start a career has to start looking inward and saying, what are the things that I care about as a person? What are the things that I love? Or is there something that really annoys me every day that I could fix?
And I can use technology to fix it.
Well, and that was kind of, it's like you look at the story of Airbnb. It was kind of like, God, none of our friends can get a hotel room during Dreamforce in San Francisco. What if we, put a few blow-up mattresses on the floor? And it's like they solved a problem that was personal to them. I think it's not about the technology. It's not about smart cities. I think we have to be a little more futuristic, all of us, in what we care about and how we want to shape the future, and then build a really cool company around that.
I love it. So before we go into the future, as you said, I want us to play this video that kind of brings everything together. It kind of like we're talking about AR, VR, XR, Metaverse, Web3. So we're going to watch the video, and then we're going to talk about the future and how optimistic we're going to be about everything that's coming.
Perfect.
Wow, I love it. And I love the last one, let's build the future. A super cool video showing the different use cases of how XR, VR, MR, Metaverse, everything is being used. In businesses, actually, we were talking about a Toll Brothers Spatial. There are some of those platforms that are there, some of the use cases specifically for a given business there. Anything you wanted to add on that video?
Well, there's a couple notable things is that, all of those solutions are available today. They're fully formed. Anyone can adopt them. The second thing is that video, it's just a reminder that I need to kind of get busy again and do another one, is that it's almost 4 years old.
Okay.
Right? And so...
technology change on a daily basis. You're going to have to just be
sitting
on your computer.
Well, I think what you're saying is I need to up my game, Haifa. I think that's where we're going with this, and that's okay. That's fair.
No.
That's fair.
What I'm saying is that there is no way we can always keep up with the technology.
This is true. I'm going to go with you at that answer. I like that one better. No, it's really showing that, again, it's not about the technology. It's like each one of those is solving a problem. You saw the woman using HoloLens to design a stage. At the end, you saw a group of people collaborating. They weren't all in headsets. Some were in headsets. Some were in VR. That was a spatial example. At the very end. There's Trip, which is an enterprise-based productivity tool based around meditation and taking breaks. Helium, also for meditation and wellness. Designing cars, designing clothing. I mean, all of this is available today.
So where is this video available online? So people, if they want to go and watch it again and look at some of the use cases?
They're going to have to listen to this whole podcast and find it in the podcast.
Love it. Say it again. Yes. So, let's talk about the future. I'm a very optimistic person, and I love technology, and I love innovation. And one thing I loved first time I met you was that you said to me is innovating innovation. And for me, I was it just stuck with me, and I'm like, huh? What did she say? And I'm we're always talking about innovation, but innovating innovation, for me, it was another level of things. So I want you to elaborate more on that, please.
Yeah. So I think of the way we innovate, and we have showing a slide now that says, true innovation happens with a blank canvas. The challenge in any large company is that there's a dynamic. There are stakeholders. If it's a publicly traded company, they have investors and markets that they have to serve, and they have boards, very, very difficult boards in some cases. And so there's the reality of their day-to-day dynamic, in that they have to deliver value right away.
Yes.
And so the challenge in innovating in that environment is that you typically default to what you already know how to do. And what we have to do is really move past that. We have to have that sort of parallel path. It's one path is, all right, how do we optimize what we're doing today? And we know all of the data. We have ways of doing that. That is not the challenge. The challenge is we are not wired to just imagine what our future is. I mean, if I said to you, just give me your full day in, 2045. When I do this in corporates, the first thing they say is, well, I'll either be dead or I'll be retired. And so what does that tell me? That tells me that their default mechanism is the reality of the world. And what we need is imagination. There's, I use the example of Steve Jobs, and no one was asking for the iPhone, right? He and his team, because it does take a village, it's not just one person's vision,
course, yeah.
Looked at themselves in the future and how do we take all of these cool things that make people's lives better and maybe combine them into one? And that's really how they came up with the iPhone. We all have that ability. It's not a special ability, but it is changing mindset. It's changing the way we think. And there is actually science about it. We were talking about meditation, and I think both of us are the same, because I'm from New York, and I'm like, meditate? Are you kidding me? I need to get into cab, I've got stuff to do, and there's a shoe sale. I cannot
stop.
I'm not doing any of these things. Because it has a bad rap, but the science behind both meditation, but also the study of mindfulness,
Yes.
which is about being present in the moment. Because the things that we think we know are all a construct. And I kind of liken the brain to a blockchain. Right, we have to get all of our senses to agree before it gets ratified to the blockchain. But the minute we ratify something to our brains, right, because we're looking for truths that we can rely on later, the further we get away from the moment it was ratified in our minds, the less true it becomes. Because everything is changing so quickly. So if we can retrain, we talk about education, if we can retrain to be able to trust our instincts and to trust the data that's in front of us, to make decisions, that is the seed of true innovation, because it allows us, it opens up different neural pathways, and it gets us out of the lane of an existing dynamic and helps us get outside of it and come up with new pathways forward.
I love it. So we talked about how are we going to use emerging technologies, but before that, I would say, what are some of the issues you see that are kind of, that we need to solve before we get to a future with a lot of emerging technologies, with a lot of creativity, and so on, innovation?
I think there's so many. I think one of them, of course, is privacy and security. It's certainly around data, but the challenge with these devices as they start to get smaller and lighter. If you imagine, I will be first in line when that really truly Wayfarer looking, Magic Ray-Ban, Magic Wayfarer comes out. That is a mixed reality device. That is a lightweight device. Yeah. But the scary part of that is the level of sensor data and all of the biometric data from eye tracking, and then we're going to have wearables tracking our heart rates. That data in the wrong hands, and again in a centralized construct, and also the existing advertising and marketing model, is incredibly dangerous and is just ripe for manipulation. And so, it's going to take a combination of both kind of a consumer outcry and regulatory, and, companies themselves changing their culture and their business models. Like, again, my point about the economics of this, like, the economics are here. What we need to do is solve the human problem. Yes, and the responsibility problem. And if we solve that, and we come up with, I even sometimes tell some of my friendlier clients, like, just rip the Band-Aid off. It's time to be more transparent. And they're like, but what are we afraid of? Mm-hmm. What are we afraid of? Like, tell us where you source your materials. Tell us what your ESG goals are, and then remove the harvesting of data from your business model and trying to manipulate us into buying our products. Products originally, advertising was just putting a worthy product in your field of view, right? And then it was word of mouth, and because it was really well made, that's how it became a good brand. That's very different today. Now it's about kind of manipulating people and FOMO and all of the things that are negatively impacting our mental health. So that's really what we have to look at and what we have to be careful of.
I love it. So having all these emerging technologies out there, how can we leverage this technology to create, to augment our lives, or to create a better experience for all of us?
Well, it is about the humanity. I love this particular slide, but it also feels like it's this very lofty statement. But I believe in it. That this isn't, the metaverse isn't a story of technology. All of this is a story of humanity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And how do we augment our lives? How do we use AI to make our lives better so that we're not thinking about all these sort of little insignificant things, but that we go back to what we're really good at, which is just our imaginations, creating something from nothing. I mean, we are actually creative beings. When we're young, we're able to draw and sing, and maybe in the typical scale of things, some are better at one thing and some are better at another, but we have these like really ripe imaginations, and it's that type of thinking. If you ask a 5-year-old, they'll be like, oh, I'm gonna ride my purple giraffe to the moon, and I'm gonna go to the money tree, and we're gonna eat purple M&Ms all day. day, and as long as I'm back by 5, and it just like kind of trickles down.
So they have a wide imagination, yeah.
And I think that's where we need to get to. So, how do we leverage technology to make our lives better?
So I've heard you before on one talk where you were talking about your Protopian vision of the future. So I want you to share. I mean, that was, I think, a couple of months ago, but I want to know your vision now of the future. How is that going to be?
Well, and the term Protopian is not one that I coined. I have heard a few other people use it, and I was like, oh, that's good. I think I'm gonna borrow that. But it's because we both talked about how we're very optimistic and we're very pro technology, but I think that there's a component that can be misconstrued as this sort of, Pollyanna-ish belief that everything's just going to be okay. Now, I mean, I certainly understand and look at and analyze the potential pitfalls, but my day-to-day choice is to fundamentally believe in our ability to take this technology and build a new version of the future. So if I wake up tomorrow and I am the supreme leader of all things in this world, we get to manage our own data. We have an AI interface that helps us manage data. A brand who would like some of our data does not go and buy it from someone. Instead, it comes and it asks us really, really nicely and then offers us something really cool, like maybe a co-designing with the designer or early access, and not exclusionary, right? Because the thing that I'm seeing now, and you saw this with retail investors, through Reddit, and I applaud moving the status quo, but why are we just trying to build another 1%? And why don't we build, I use the term, economy of scarcity versus, economy of abundance. And again, I sound like I've been in California too long, and maybe I have. I've lost my New York roots, but I really do believe that there's another economy out there because we have spent so much time teaching ourselves the status quo. We have taught ourselves to not be innovative. We have taught ourselves to believe in things that aren't necessarily true and that are really just a matter of perception. But everything we think we know is a construct. So let's simulate other outcomes and come up with different constructs that serve us as humans better than what we have today.
I love it. So I see the questions popping up on the screen. I want to start taking some questions first, and then we're going to talk about the last thing, which is our Immersive Tech Summit, the Central Florida Immersive Tech Summit happening this Friday. But let's first take some questions. So how can businesses begin to using augmented reality and other new technologies for marketing purposes?
So I think that, we talked about changing the kind of advertising and marketing business models around, moving away from data and making it experiential. There's quite a lot of data now to suggest that really the consumers of the future, and even my generation, which is frankly just ancient,
Come on.
even we want something that is much more transparent and want something that is much more about experience than things. And there's always going to be luxury and there's always going to be brands, but what if luxury is defined in a different way? Like, what if luxury is being out in nature or being able to actually go off grid? Because I do see that starting to happen, that there is going to be this component of, all things natural and nature and non-tech driven. What if those become the luxury items of the future? And it's not items and it's not things. It's around experience. It's how we inhabit the planet. It's how we improve the planet. We've been looking at, and hopefully we'll eventually be doing some work in Saudi with Neom. And the vision of Neom is tremendous. And so if you look at some of how they're marketing this, their vision is less around the luxury piece of it. But as marketers, and I've just started to see some of these campaigns hit the US, they're really talking about a completely different lifestyle that is about moving cities into a much more kind of organized and sort of centralized construct where everything that you need is within a 5-minute walk, and that it condenses so much that you still don't feel like you're crowded and you've lost space. But what it does is it allows the natural habitat of Earth and the world to be resilient and to regrow, and so that our natural resources start to replenish. And I think, when from a marketing standpoint, that just seems impossible and crazy, right, in the existing construct. It's not how we do things. But I think the marketers that start to really play into this next evolution of, having a brand come directly to a consumer, the direct to consumer channel has always been the most coveted. It's why Amazon has such a strong foothold. Yeah. And if companies want to build that direct to consumer model, then have an open and transparent relationship with them, and don't harvest their data, and just tell them the truth about your products, and maybe ask them their opinions on how they should optimize, right? And again, it's like when I say rip the Band-Aid off, what are we afraid of, right?
I love it. I love it. So the next question is, what role do you think AI like ChatGPT will play in the metaverse? How do these technologies overlap?
Well, they definitely overlap. I don't know that it's like ChatGPT specifically, but on that Web3 slide, when I talked about the semantic web or semantic search, that's really where ChatGPT and these types of generative AI, where they start to not only understand in a predictive way what we're searching for and in much more context, but if we are able to build that interface that allows us to manage our own data with the help of AI, the context of an AI that is, serving you kind of personally, to be able to have that two-sided view. So it has access to the data that you choose to let it have access to relative to what you're trying to accomplish. And then AI being able to wire that together is a phenomenal construct. Now we're quite a ways away from that, but I do think that it's a big proponent of how we interact in the future.
So talking about data, should these technologies and data formats be handled by the private sector or the government?
That is a massive hot potato. Thank you for whoever dropped that one.
We can skip if you
No,
we're not going to go into details. But
but it's not an either or. It's absolutely both. But it's I would add that it's private sector, government, and consumer at the individual level that we have to find our voice collectively, because I don't think we're all that far away in how we think about what we want from this next evolution. And I don't think we want to be manipulated.
Of course not. Yeah.
So we can use our voices, we can use our outside voice to really let it be known. But I think we all have to not be afraid of working with governments and working with private and public companies to be able to kind of collectively build what the guardrails are. We do have to build some significant guardrails, and we have to do it quickly.
I love it. So next question is, how can we address potential biases in AI systems that may have impact on the development and application of the tech?
We just have to put more AI on it. No, I'm being flippant. This is one of the scariest things for me personally, because we've seen so many AI fails.
Yes.
There have been many stories around HR where innocently, they're gathering the data on their most successful employees at a company. Well, that then has a particular sector of successful people. So then the AI naturally chooses resumes that kind of fit that particular profile. And so it's very challenging on, D&I and initiatives. And so, we again have to make sure that we engage. We're also very passionate about women in tech, and it doesn't stop at just women and gender diversity. It's culture diversity.
Diversity, everything diversity. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't attract, code writers and, people building the AI algorithms, if we don't have a broad swath of people building those algorithms, we're not going to be able to avoid, conscious, and I say unconscious bias, but there is conscious bias. There are people who
do
have
that
very,
works.
very specific belief
Yes, I
systems,
agree.
and they
I
are
agree.
hard coding AI.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Yeah.
So how can we prepare the workforce for the changing job landscape caused by the integration of AI, XR, and the metaverse?
And see, and this might be one of my plants because I'm very happy about this question. So first of all, we did talk about, I think that's a big opportunity for startups or anyone who wants to get into the business is starting to look at what kind of curriculum could we start to build. But one of the companies that I work with, Mission Impact Academy, are based in Miami, and they're actually going to be here on Friday, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Nice.
And there are other companies doing this, but what we'd like to do is kind of look at this from a global standpoint, is talk to companies and understand very specifically what the jobs of the future will be. And not only ask them, because they do have some idea, but they may not have all the answers. So again, kind of collectively come up
Brainstorm together and
with
come up
those
with
pathways, and then build curriculums. Again, we're going back to this lifelong learning methodology, that it's not just, you get your degree and you go trundling off
We
to
were
work.
talking about that last night.
Yes. It's that this is really about career evolution, and because technology is going to start, taking away some of these job responsibilities. Not only do we need to upskill people whose jobs are going to go away, but we need to give them the opportunity to move in a different direction or upskill maybe into a completely different type of career, because jobs aren't going to go away. But there is a specific area that and a lot of people who are going to be impacted, and so it's upskilling those people, and then giving a lot of choice and opportunity with the right kind of curriculum and very specific learning pathways that allow them to move into these jobs and train into these jobs that we then collectively identify with corporates.
Yes. I love it. Yeah, instead of sometimes just laying off people, finding, as you said, upskilling those people, giving them a new opportunity, and then hire them again for these jobs.
Exactly.
So the next question is, what makes Orlando a smart city, and what are the other smart cities? I mean, we talked about this, but if you can say it again.
Yes. So I don't know what the other smart cities are. I have come across several municipalities that have been designated smart cities, and they're global. What I will say is that in all of the municipalities that we've been interfacing with around the world, and that's in Europe and in the Caucasus region.
I think I saw it was Madrid. I saw New York in the list, Singapore.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to go to the Google on that one for you, but we'll come back and we'll put it in the notes on YouTube. But it's around infrastructure, one, and sort of functionality, and it's building those layers of data lakes that are dynamic data, that optimize systems, that touch on the human elements, the kind of machine elements. I think we missed one of the slides that kind of talks about the Internet of Everything.
Internet of Things, yes.
But
they had it on the screen. It's
they did.
they did have it on the screen.
I missed it and talked over it. But that's really the concept of making a smart city smart. And it's not limited to just the data. It's really how the data is applied on the human level, and I think that should be the priority. And that's what's interesting about Orlando is it's like, okay, we don't have to drive people around for 4 hours when they come to the city. We can now optimize that whole experience and answer all of their questions visually in the comfort of the very beautiful Orlando Economic Partnership offices. And then just order out for snacks.
Yeah.
Much better. So much better.
Okay, so we're going to take our final question. How far away are we from full adoption of these technologies? And then will they all happen, or will one win among others?
Well, in terms of how far away are we, it is an evolution. I think we always say with technology that it's 5 to 10 years. Everything is 5 to 10 years away. The truth is we don't really know. It is very, very hard to make mixed reality glasses, right? So until those arrive, then what are the things we can do now? So again, it's not just about how soon. But it's like, let's spend this time instead of worrying about when the hardware is going to get here. We can solve all of the hardware problems, right? We can solve the technology problems. Like, those are going to get solved. Let's assume they get solved. Let's build instead a vision of the future that is what we say, right? And it's not about what, there was a slide that we might have missed that is about, art imitates life, life imitates art. Mm-hmm. We don't build our own vision of the future, right? And so we need to take the time to do that. So let's spend this time, instead of predicting when we're going to have the devices and when the metaverse is going to be here, and think about what we'd like it to look like, and let's build that.
I love it. So thank you, Amy,
Thank
for
you.
everything. Actually, let's talk about one last thing. We have the inaugural Central Florida Immersive Technology Summit. Immersive Technology Summit, yeah, I said that right. I'm like, happening this Friday, March 31st, here at Full Sail University. That's in collaboration, in partnership with the VR/AR Association, the Central Florida chapter. And Amy, you're going to be one of the keynote speakers.
Yes.
And also moderating some of the sessions. So can you tell us a bit about your participation? And I am looking forward for that event. I'm looking forward for all the talks and panels and presentations and meeting all the people and networking with everyone.
Yeah.
But I want to hear.
Yeah. So we have some really, really amazing speakers. And again, it's VRARA, and we have some speakers from Unity and a multitude of companies. Pearly Chen from HTC is coming up.
Yes.
She's down in Miami now, but she's coming up for the event. So there's great content. There'll be some great, exhibits so people can kind of see.
We have a career fair happening. So for the job seekers, please come. We have a 1 to 5. This is a free event, by the way.
Yes.
It is a free event for for everyone. We have a tech expo where Central Florida companies will be displaying, exhibiting their latest technology. And it's all here at Full Sail. It's all
Which
here
I'm
at
really
Full Sail.
excited about.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you so much again
for
your time. I hope everyone liked today's episode. My name is Dr. Haifa Maamar. Thank you for watching us. Have a good day.